I think there's a way of using that to add to the argument. However, the teleological argument will be my main argument, and the fine tuning will be I guess the main argument, the tip of the spear. So I thought it would be worth going over my thoughts on the subject. I've done a little research. Watched Ben Burgis did a commentary on a William Glade Craig debate against Christopher Hitchens, where him and his panel discussed it. I'll be discussing Ben's comments on it, responding to his thoughts on it. First, let me introduce it. All right, fine tuning. So, in contemporary cosmology, physicists have noticed that these the values of certain the fundamental properties, elements, forces of nature are extremely precise, to the point if they varied in a slight way, we would not have a universe develop in a way where we had galaxies and stars, planets, and life developing on Earth, which happened. I'm glad it happened. Hopefully you are too. And big example, one of the most prime examples is the cosmological constant, the rate at which the universe is expanding. It's just precisely so 10 to the gazillion power or whatever, some crazy number where it varies just a little bit, then we get no planets, right? No revolving around stars, no galaxies, no chance at life, much less this even more maybe finely tuned life that we have on Earth, where we're dependent on even more specific chance, I guess, fine tuning, depending on how you look at it. But I digress. I want to stick to the cosmic fine tuning because vast majority of cosmologists accept fine tuning as a reality and seek to explain it in some way, whether by reference to a complete theory of physics, unified theory of physics, theory of everything. Maybe they'll get string theory, M theory will come in and somehow provide an explanation that shows a physical necessity of sorts. There's the multiverse hypothesis, which initially I kind of think it was motivated by fear of design argument by some physicists, but now they got a working hypothesis that involves inflationary cosmology and string theory, where there's island universes will spin off according to string theory, the infinite set of them. So many so that one might argue that so many universes it was just bound to produce that one with these precisely fine-tuned constants, right? After a gazillion tries, they got us. So that's kind of the background here. Now I should add there is I came across in my research some work in 2019 by Fred Adams, who he makes a case that these values have a much wider range than people think. That for example, the cosmological constant has a much wider range of potential values that could be lead to life permitting conditions, but you have to tweak a whole bunch of the other values just so. And I think get the feeling he's pushed that research in maybe further directions on how far you can tweak different values to finally get a result. And if he's right, that would mitigate against the fine-tuning argument. However, even his calculations leave what he calls highly improbable ratios, between the cosmological constant and the Planck scale, and others he mentions, which I don't have at hand and I don't really understand it anyway. But the point being, he admits that the fine-tuning problem isn't solved by him; it's reduced, perhaps significantly so. So number one, reason he doesn't get rid of it. So it's number one reason why I'm not going to let Fred Adams kill my fine-tuning buzz, right? Number two is I haven't been able to find yet any real response to him. Critical of his work. I saw like Victor Stenger plugged his work. He's impressed, which doesn't surprise me. He really doesn't want fine tuning to be existence for design, which is fine. But I haven't seen really any engagement from the greater community. Luke Barnes, like for example, I was looking for him to see if he'd responded to it, and he did respond to some of Adam's older work in like 2010, but he hasn't. I can't find a response from him anywhere, like online, Google Scholar, on YouTube. So same goes with like atheist cosmologists like like Sean Carroll, and so it's worth reserving judgment since the vast majority of these cosmologists, do accept fine tuning and are puzzled by it and seeking explanations. I can, for the sake of, I think, reasonably assume it to be the case, right? Although we gotta hedge our bets to some degree. We never know what new findings are going to turn up in science. But assuming it's true, which I think is a reasonable assumption, I think Ben will probably go along with it. It's worth getting into the philosophy, right? Like, can we use fine tuning to argue for the existence of God or the existence of intelligent design, right? And the first thing I want to deal with is the anthropic objection. And so, fine-tune argument, kind of, you make it, you say, hey, look, under naturalism, it seems highly improbable for these numbers to come out just right. It seems like chance is too great. Therefore, it seems, according to the physicists, again, they think there's no like physical necessity. These numbers need to be so precise. So it looks like design, right? More likely than not, right? And you can kind of add to that, like some basic value theory that consciousness, conscious beings, this is good, and that an intelligent mind, would have that recognition of that value and want to create a universe as such. And that's kind of like the basic like outline of the fine tuning argument. And then the main objection that surfaced to it in like the 80s and became hotly disputed was called the anthropic objection. Anthropos, man, anthropology, Greek word for man, anthropos. And anthropic objection goes, well, hey, look, fine tuning, that's great and all, but you wouldn't be here like to question the fact, if things hadn't proceeded in this way. You could, I think like Douglas Adams, the writer, it's like the puddle argument. Like even a puddle, could look back at its own existence, and think like, oh, everything went just in case, right? Wouldn't be here because there is a causal chain of improbable events that leads to like every puddle, like that being just the way it is. And we can say the same thing about, us in our lives, looking backwards. This argument, kind of some plausibility to it if on the surface. However, there's a pretty good, I guess, on the surface response to it. John Leslie's famous response with the firing squad. And what it shows, this example is intended to show that, the fact that you're survived or that you exist is not justification for, refusing to like rationally, reasonably investigate the circumstances that led up to, you still existing, And so the firing squad example, you are about to be executed, right? Firing squad, they're close in range, skilled marksman. Looks like they got the good guns. Gun goes off, and you're still around. And Leslie claims, reasonably so in my view, that it would be rational for you to go, oh, they might have missed on purpose, or something happened, some contrivance, some intentional act like caused like this. Whether the equipment was malfunction, or maybe not, tampered with, I should say. Or they were ordered to miss, or they rebelled, you wouldn't just chalk it up and to, no explanation needed because you're still around, right? You wouldn't just say, oh, you're still around, I think Thomas Nagel gives the example of, if you're like flying on a plane, you're wondering why the air pressure in the cabin is the same at sea level. Somebody said, hey man, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't. That wouldn't be like an adequate explanation. You can still go ahead and explain why. Why it works that way. So I think this explanation is pretty good. And it turns out I was kind of looking for a good response to it in the literature, and what I was seeing was, you need to, you already know you're alive, and that's background information. We're dealing with old evidence, and the argument being that you got to find some way to judge the likelihood of the cosmos coming into the conditions in this manner that it did with these finely tuned constraints against the background of possibilities that don't involve human life coming, right? And then you get that they call the probability, where you get this like try to imagine somehow that you were alive and conscious before life was created, but you didn't know you were conscious. It's kind of a weird thought experiment, and then from that perspective, you can generate a low enough probability to where the fact that life did come along isn't enough to like overtake it, I suppose the argument goes. And these arguments use like Bayesian logic, and they're often spelled out in the articles in like symbolic, Bayesian form, and makes it kind of difficult to read. But I don't find it terribly convincing. I think being asked to like set aside the significant evidence, right? The most big part of the evidence as that we're alive, we're here, that life developed this way, that in conjunction with the fine tuning, right? We can look at it just like we can look at the firing squad that missed, right? Like why? It's reasonable. Now, better objection I saw, not in the literature, but on YouTube from, what's this guy's name? Matt Dillahunty. Hope I'm saying that right. Do like YouTube search, Atheist Matt owns Christian, and this guy's name will come up. He's all over the place, and he's I think he's a magician. To, if so, put him in a long line of these magicians like Houdini, James Randi, who are like to debunk and make fun of even people who believe in magic and God, and, aren't like materialists, which it's an interesting phenomenon. But guy's pretty bright, and I've seen him do a lot of debates against guys who were pretty bad at it. I quit watching pretty soon, but I saw like a phone conversation where a caller very politely and thoughtfully got into the fine tuning argument with him, and he raised a good response to the firing squad example. And what he said was, in the firing squad case, we have agents. We have known agents that can play like intentional causal roles, like in various aspects of their lives, and so it's not like unreasonable to wonder if they missed, because there already is like kind of this background information in place. Like we know these guys can do it, right? When it comes to universes like coming into being, or being like finely tuned in the early stages or whatnot, we don't have like background information for that. We don't have experience with agents that do stuff like that to where it makes it reasonable to make such an inquiry. And so I thought that argument was kind of interesting, maybe better than what I was finding in the literature. So I thought about it, And I decided it wasn't that good of an argument after all. And so I'm going to tell you why. You could imagine a scenario where there wasn't known agents, right? Yet there, if they were like, some sort of like pattern that was suggestive of design would have come through, it would be reasonable to wonder, if there was, some sort of like design, some sort of intentional effect to be in place, and and that's what we're looking for, right? In a way, his response is, question begging, but it's like, hey, if you're in a situation where you're wondering if there's an intention in place, right? Like, you shouldn't have to only pursue that task with reference to situations where known agents are in place, right? Like, it seems like it's reasonable to, like, say, hey, like, there's conditions where we would infer the existence of some sort of agent, even if there's not known agents, like, that make universes or whatever. And so, like, this example, my oak tree casino example, everybody do like casino examples in this fine-tuning literature. And so I got a guy, he's got like a plot of land, he's got some oak trees, and he takes like three of them, and he calculates how many acorns are dropping from them, like different days of the year, comes up with a nice little like algorithm where you can kind of determine the rough odds of how many acorns are going to drop, every day. And he decides to open a little casino, and like online, and these oak tree is very secure. He's making sure nobody can tamper with his own property, right? And he gets people to wager on how many acorns are going to drop from the oak tree, like in a given day or week or however time period. And let's say he's like determined that looks like this day, whatever, it's in March or whatever, March 13th, the weather is such, probably we're going to get like 200 to 750 acorns are going to drop. All right, so I'm going to adjust the odds like this and open up my casino. Guy comes in, he's like, first customer, 475 acorns. And he hits, right? Whoa. All right, well, seems like, odds, right? Like, this be chance, So he decides to broaden it out, and he gets, brings in another, 20 of his oak trees, and then now he's got 10,000 to 24,000 acorns dropping per day. And the same guy decides to let it ride, offers him better odds, but still astronomical that this guy can pull this off. And the guy comes in, he's like, whatever, 16,000 acorns. What the hell? Go with an even number. And lo and behold, he hits, right? And so, at this point, is it reasonable? There's no known agency here, right? Like oak trees aren't known to intervene in gambling and produce the exact type of acorn somebody might set up for a game like that. Psychokinesis, maybe this guy making the bets got in his mind, right? That's different. The guy lives in Australia. It seems like a long shot, right? But if you run this thought experiment enough, right, you're going to get to a point where, you're going to have to say, all right, these oak trees or something's happening here. There's some sort of intentional effect, whether it be oak trees, God, spirits, ghost, right? You're not going to just let it go and chalk it up to chance because there's no known agency, right? That's which is why it's reasonable to inquire into whether something has agency or not of that kind, even if it's of a kind that we don't think does. In the case of oak trees, right? Let alone to something that creates a universe, which is probably like a neutral, right? We wouldn't necessarily, I would be super skeptical that there could be an agent, even if it's not a good God. But anyway, so I think this thought experiment provides a pretty strong response to Mr. Dillahunty's objection. And I'd like to add to that, I've heard, I don't know if this is Dawkins, Hitchens, Carroll, I don't know, these atheists say like, well, I believe in God if like, a cloud wrote in the sky, like, hi, this is God, I exist, But, right, like you could say that really like skeptical atheist, like maybe like a really skeptical casino, Oak Tree Casino gambler could just be like stubborn and be like, I don't care, man. That guy could guess 20,000 times in a row the right acorns, right? Or, God could write, it's me, I exist, Jerry, and, it's I'm not convinced because there's an infinite amount of like combinations. Each one is just as likely as the other, whether they be cloud formations. And most of them are random. Sometimes they come together for little shapes. Sometimes, very rare, they'll spell out, little private messages to Jerry, that God exists. And, you don't read too much into that. You can imagine somebody making that objection, but it seems kind of like most people are going to be like, yeah, that would be evidence, right? So I think Matt's argument, I think it fails. I think we got, it's reasonable to wonder, about causal history of you existing, I think that's fine. And if you find, extraordinarily rare, events happening that aren't normally explained by agents, it's reasonable, to infer like design or some sort of like intentional purpose behind it. So let me move real quick here to like Ben's example, which is kind of related. So Ben's example in the William Lane Craig video, his concern with the fine-tuning argument in this segment, he says that his concern is that they're using some sort of reasoning that we wouldn't accept under like, comparable circumstances, ordinary comparable circumstances. He gives an example of somebody sitting down and he gets, dealt some cards and he gets like a really crappy hand, his opponent gets a good hand, and even though it was like pretty unlikely for the guy across him to get such a good hand, he wouldn't like say cheater, because like long odds happen all the time, right? Like that's just the way it works. I think you could even expand that much more than like a deck of 52 card, you could make it like 10,000 cards, add different shapes and numbers, right? And still, you could just go and sit down at a giant, massive card table, I imagine 10,000 cards, right? And that same jerk you don't like 4 seats over, right? What gets like, crazy, like good winning hand, gets like the only joker in the 10,000 card deck, right? Well, it's in the deck, right? Somebody's going to get it. And, I think those situations, yeah. Right. But if you keep pushing the example, you're going to get to a point where you have a breaking point. Just like with the acorns, eventually all but the most obstinate atheist or skeptic is going to be like, something's going on here. There's some sort of teleology. There's some sort of, at least it's a good chance, a decent chance, right? Like, that there's some sort of like mind in play that's manipulating things. And so my like response to like Ben's like card example would be like, you just take it up a notch, imagine like, 4 quadrillion cards, they have to be like digital of some sense, I suppose. But, and you got to draw like, it's this like massive lottery. You got to draw like a single card, right? And then to throw in the boot, like, your family's gonna like die if you pick the wrong card. It's like personally like meaningful as like health to you, right? Planet's gonna blow up. I don't know. Like maybe that's worse, but family die might be worse because I have to live with it. But a catastrophe, right? Like it's everything's at stake, right? And so, among these 4 quadrillion, like whatever cards or numbers or whatever you have to pick from, pull one out, right? Or, you say whatever, the number is, and you win, right? What a relief. Now, in that circumstance, I think it'd be reasonable, right? We'd say, yeah, that person, they should probably wonder, wouldn't be like crazy to wonder if there's some sort of like intentional design behind that number being chosen, right? If they weren't somehow set up to choose that number, and it wasn't just a matter of like chance or dumb luck or necessity. Again, my point from like the oak tree example, or like the cloud riding in the sky to Jerry, everybody has their breaking point, right? Like certain sense, like a certain circumstances, you can contrive where the improbabilities are so extreme, where you're going to go ahead and infer design, even if there's no agent of that type that of involved, or even when it seems like highly unlikely, like an oak tree. Coming up with examples that, this is the thing, we're dealing with numbers much larger than 10,000 cards, right? Like Ben's talking about a 52 card deck, right? Like we're talking about these numbers with like the exponents on it, right? Like these numbers that are, where like all the atoms in the universe, right? Maybe couldn't like spell out that number. I don't know, crazy odds that they're talking about, and even the ratios that under atoms, right? Atoms, work. They're still much greater than this 52 cards, so. And then when you and then I want to added the family at stake, because throwing in stakes is what it matters, right? Like if you get a series of like meaningless cards, but they happen to be the same, I don't know, 8 of clubs, 3 of diamonds, playing hold'em, and say you get them 10 hands in a row, you definitely might think something's up, right? But you get pocket aces 10 hands in a row, and you're gonna wow, somebody's really got my back. Right? Like this isn't just a glitch. This is like something working in my favor, and instead of it just, and that's kind of the strength of the fine tuning argument. You have these seemingly like improbable odds, right? Which you can even strengthen by the probability of like Earth surviving asteroids, whatnot, and plate tectonics and oceans developing and abiogenesis, like. And on top of this cosmic fine tuning, right, and to a point where, I think the odds are in a comparable position to where most people have their breaking points. Like the Acorn example, the casino example, the $4 quadrillion deck of cards example, show there's a breaking point that most people are going to hit. Don't know if Ben's there or if I'll get him there with this argument. It's kind of new to me. This isn't my field, but these are my thoughts on the matter. But the breaking point's determined by one's priors, right? Priors matter a lot. My own priors, right? Like I'm probably pretty happy with like the Fred Adams highly improbable ratios, because I have some epistemic value on whatever numinous experiences I've had, and then even more so in those that they happen and are meaningful, and that lowers my priority for God. My Platonism, in some sense, probably does too. But even if you think it's really improbable, I submit there's like a breaking point, right? If it's if clouds tomorrow morning, Ben looks out and it clearly says, Ben, I am God, I am real, tell Todd he is right, I think he'll take it seriously. I think he's hallucinating, but, at some point he'll have a break, if he sees it every morning, and his friends see it too, right? Like think, I mean, at some point, everybody's got a breaking point. And I think the fine-tuning discussion, when I get to that point where that breaking point is going to be, I think, reached by, most reasonable people if they really, really consider the arguments and the data, at least, as a layman, humble layman. So that is my presentation on fine-tuning argument. Thanks for listening. Really hoping to get some feedback on this before I get destroyed by Ben in the debate. Sure, he'll be ready to go, but I think I got some pretty good counters to the best responses. Not dealing with like the Bayesian logical formulas and not doing too deeply with the science, but just kind of going with the consensus of the best, the experts who know. And thoughts on the next video, I might be doing one on like moral realism, the contemporary debates on that, and fleshing that out a little more. Because it seems intuitively plausible, but I didn't really make the case. I just kind of been clowning Ben for, I don't know if what Ben's view is, but people who aren't moral realists, I usually clown them for thinking it's okay to throw babies in trash cans. It's a matter of opinion, which isn't very serious. So maybe I'll do one on that. I've been looking into that research recently. Also, I want to do a video on parapsychological evidence for the afterlife. That one, right, probably a couple weeks away, maybe after the debate. I don't know how soon that's going to happen, but those are two on the horizon. And we'll see what else I might come up with. So thank you for listening. And Ben, if you're still there, I'm coming for you. Better be ready.